Now to begin the proper presentation session, I will request Professor Dr. Afzal Qadir for his talk on visual system of the human eye.
Good morning and thank you all. So I would like to start my presentation with the visual system. So our review of the visual system, vision is a very primary sense. Visual pathway convey the light impulse from the retina to the visual cortex in the occipital lobe. The visual impulse are generated in the photoreceptor called rods and cones. So to make it easy, as Sanaullah Jan Sahib said that amblyopia is difficult or pediatric ophthalmology difficult, but we are trying and I will try my best to make it easy. So in the retina, we have to explain in view of first order neuron, second order neuron, third order neuron. It's all come in the retina. So we have a photoreceptor which are colored and the rest of rods. So cones and rods are the first order neuron which come to the second order neuron with the bipolar cell and third with the retinal ganglion cell, and then come out to the optic nerve. So there are approximately 1 million axon of the optic nerve and consist among almost 40% of the total number of total optic cranial nerves. So the axon in the optic nerve is the 40% of all cranial nerves. The primary sensory sensors for sight are rods and cones. With release of glutamate, they transfer electromagnetic wave of light between 400 and 700 nanometer into graded changes of the membrane potential. The signal from photoreceptor continues to the bipolar cell and then to the lateral retinal ganglion cell. The axon of the retinal ganglion cell pass through the optic nerve to the optic chiasma and then ultimately to the optic tract, which then reach to the lateral geniculate body, and from then lateral geniculate body to the optic radiation and to the visual cortex. So this diagram shows which we have in a visual field, and the as I mentioned about the first and second and third order neuron, they goes to the optic nerve to the optic chiasma and then come to the lateral geniculate body, which is circle in red, and then it's come to the visual cortex. So we have neuronal elements, 4 order neurons. First is a photoreceptor, which is rods and cones, and then come to the bipolar cell, and then retinal ganglion cell at the 4th. Neuronal elements from the lateral geniculate body and their axon from the optic radiation form optic radiation and terminate in the primary visual cortex. This again mentioning 1, 2, 3, these neurons come within the retina, and the 4th one from the lateral geniculate body form optic radiation and into the visual cortex of the posterior occipital lobe. So rods and cones are 7 millions are formed in the center part of the retina. They are responsible for the vision in strong light, photoptic vision, and perception of shape and color. There are three type of cones which are blue in color, green color, and red color because of the electromagnetic wavelength depend upon the wavelength. So we have a blue wavelength are 420 nanometer, the green one is 500 at 30 nanometer, and the red one is 560 nanometer. Again, these are the graph and the photoreceptor which I explained. The photopigments is bleached not only by the light with the wavelength to which it is maximally sensitive, but also by the strong light with the shorter and the longer wavelengths. Thus, one kind of cone alone cannot inform about color. Another third type of the photosensitive cell in the retina is called melanopsin-containing retinal ganglion cell. They give rise to the retinohypothalamic tract, convey the sense of environmental illumination, and to the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, thus regulate circadian rhythm. It is all 24-hour time when you are waking the daily routine work and you are going to sleep is all about the stimulus given to the retina, and as you know about the light and darkness, and then you have a 24-hour cycle. As I mentioned first about the optic photoreceptor like rods and cones, then we come to the second part of the neuron or the bipolar cell. The bodies of the bipolar cells form the inner nuclear layer of the retina. They can contact the rods and cones with the retinal ganglion cell. These are the bipolar cell, and these are the cone, and these are the rods. They come to join with the bipolar cell and then to the ganglion cell. This is when they get stimulated, they give information to the bipolar cell, and the bipolar cell give information or signals to the ganglion retinal ganglion cell, and it goes on. In cones, two kinds of bipolar cell, on bipolar cell and off bipolar cell. The on bipolar cell are the excited when the light hits the photoreceptor and are inhibit in dark, while the off bipolar cell excited in the dark and inhibit in light. In rods, all bipolar cell are hyperpolarized when the light hits the rods. No on and off phenomena in this condition. So again, the same thing as I mentioned about the ganglion cell. These are the photoreceptor cones, and this one is the rod which join to the bipolar cell and through on to the optic nerve. The third order neuron, retinal ganglion cell, next to the bipolar cell. These are ganglion cell. Dendrites of the bipolar cell are connected with the ganglion cell, and the axon of the ganglion cell form the optic nerve. Some like polar cell, there are two types of ganglion cell. The on ganglion cell are stimulated when the light hits the cone to which they are connected, and the off ganglion cell are stimulated in darkness. We have again two types of ganglion cell, M cell and the P cell. The M cells are larger retinal ganglion cell, while the and their axon of magnocellular layer of the retinal geniculate body terminates there, and the M or the P cell are the smaller retinal ganglion cell, send their axon to the paravocellular layer of the retinal ganglion cell. The M and the P cell terminate in the M and P neurons of the lateral geniculate body respectively. The P cell have a smaller cell body, a less sensitive dendritic tree and thin axon, and most numerous, about 80% of all ganglion cells, and the P cell responds preferentially to light with the particular wavelength, color specific, and high stereopsis view or vision, while the M or magnocellular cells are not color specific. It just give you a gross movement or gross illumination. The amacrine cells are intercalated between the bipolar cell and the ganglion cell. These regulate the effect of bipolar cell on and ganglion cells. Amacrine cells are responsible for interaction between on and off synaptic center, which is important for the increased contrast and the detection of motion. In retina, there are receptive and peripheral fields. The receptive fields provide a direct connection of the photoreceptor with the bipolar cell, while the peripheral field photoreceptor connect the bipolar cell with the horizontal cells. ये डायरेक्ट हैं और आप बायोपोलर सेल डायरेक्ट फोटो रिसेप्टर के साथ कनेक्ट होते हैं और आपका यानी सेंट्रल फील्ड जो है वो एक्टिवेट होता है, वाइल दी पैरासेंट्रल एरिया जो है वो आपका थ्रू हॉरिजेंटल सेल जो है उसके थ्रू कनेक्ट होता है बाइपोलर सेल की वजह से, और वो आपको डार्क दिखाई देता है. The horizontal cell processes establish contact with the inner segment of the photoreceptor and with the dendrites of the bipolar cells, regulate the termination from the photoreceptor to the bipolar cell. That is responsible for the typical receptive fields of central excitation and lateral inhibition. Now come to the optic nerve. The axon from the retinal ganglion cell runs toward the posterior pole and passes to the wall of the eyeball. The axon in the optic nerve are in protrusion of the hindbrain. The optic nerve is covered by meninges and subarachnoid space filled with the CSF. The nerve passes posterior medial in the orbit toward the optic canal and into the enter into the medial cranial fossa. The optic chiasma, the nerves of both sides meet in the optic chiasma where the fibers of the nasal hemiretina cross to the contralateral optic tract. The brown and the blue color. So we have the hemiretina of the nasal side, where the brown is the temporal hemiretina. So this come to the optic nerve form and then come into the optic chiasma, where is the temporal one uncrossed toward the optic tract and radiation, and the nasal one get crossed to the contralateral side. The main portion of the all axons, 90%, form the lateral root of the optic tract and continuous to the lateral geniculate body. The 10% of the axon constitute the medial root of the optic tract. These axons terminate in the tectum of the mesencephalon, especially in the superior colliculus and the pretractal nuclei. These medial fibers are important for optic reflex, such as pupillary reflex or vestibulo-ocular reflex. Some fiber of the optic tract terminate in the hypothalamus retino-ophthalmic tract and contribute to regulate of circadian rhythm. Of the lateral come from the optic chiasma to the lateral geniculate body. It is a part of the hindbrain and contains bodies of the fourth neuron of the optic pathway. It is composed of 6 cellular layer, ventrodorsal direction, separated by the axon dendrites. This is the lateral geniculate body and the optic radiation, and comes to the optic radiation comes to the visual cortex. Here we have a P cell and M cells. So the first two, magnocellular and the parvocellular, the four for the P cells, as I mentioned about the ganglion cell in the retina, which are small cell body and very specific and color and having a stereoscopic view. But M1, M2 at the first and second layer of the and then it's terminate at the 1, at 2, the magnocellular. And second is the contralateral side. It's terminate the fiber from the retina, from the nasal side and from the temporal side. So the is from the ipsilateral side. It's terminate at this layer like the second one and the third one and the fifth one. While the contralateral eye, which are the green line, comes from and terminate at the 1, 4th and 6th one. The 3 layers receive the crossed axon, while the other 3 layers receive the uncrossed axon. The body of the neurons in the layer 2, 3, and 5 receive the information from the ipsilateral temporal hemiretina, while the layer 1, 4th, and 6 receive information from the contralateral nasal hemiretina. The posterior 4 layers are composed of small cells are called P cell, and the 2 interior layers are formed by the bodies of large neurons called M layer or M1, M2. The optic radiation, the neurons of the lateral geniculate body send their axon to the cortex. These axons form the optic radiation as a part of the posterior limb of the internal capsule. These are the line are optic radiation, and the part is the internal capsule. Meyer loop, the inferior fiber contains information about the superior visual field called Meyer loop. The Meyer loop passes lateral to the interior portion of the temporal horn of the lateral ventricle, then the course through the temporal lobe to terminate in the primary visual cortex below the calcarine fissure in the medial surface of the occipital lobe. Superior fibers contains information regarding the inferior visual field and travel through the parietal lobe, terminate in the superior part of the primary visual cortex above the calcarine fissure. The visual cortex, the primary visual cortex or striate area known as V1 or 17. The visual area 1 is located alongside the calcarine sulcus on the medial side of the occipital lobe. The primary visual cortex is formed by the 6th layer of the neuron as a part of the neocortex and form the area 17. The axon of the lateral geniculate body terminate mainly on the lamina 4, where information is transmitted to the other cortical centers. The striate area contains the retino-optic map of the visual field, and approximately 50% of that are represents only the central 5 degree of visual field. This is the diagram showing the visual field, while it is the fiber from the retina, and it's in that very form terminate in the primary visual cortex. The cell of the striate with similar orientation selectivity are organized to the columns perpendicular to the surface of the cortex. Systems of striate area. The striates area can be divided into three basic systems responsible for the particular modalities of vision. The first system is formed by three cortical columns that are specific for the perception from the left and right eyes. This organization is important for binocular vision and basic for depth perception. The second system is composed of the cells that receive information from identical retinal positions and have the same axis of orientation. These provide the perception of movement. The third system is organized into columns that form the irregular spots on the transverse section is called blobs, and they are responsible for the perception of color. Between the area of the blobs are localized neurons that are called interblobs, specific for the perception of shapes. Extrastriate visual cortex information from the primary visual area is sent to the associated cortical center called extrastriate visual area, where the final processing of vision takes place. The information from the primary visual cortex reaches the extrastriate area via the ventral or end dorsal stream. The ventral stream passes downward from the occipital lobe to the temporal lobe and carries information about objects, identification, including shape, contrast, and color, and also called what pathway. The dorsal system information about the spatial feature and movements called where pathway runs in the dorsal stream upward from the occipital lobe to the parietal lobe. And thank you.